Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this last series of the Mastering High Performance with Terry McCloy. Thank you again for joining us, and as usual, if you have any questions at all throughout the presentation, please pop them into the Q&A box, and Terry will answer those as we go through. Just an intro for Terry. Terry is an internationally recognised leadership and change expert and one of the most highly acclaimed leadership facilitators globally. He has led leadership forums and retreats all over the world and is recognised for his understanding of leadership in changing, challenging times. He has also successfully led over 15 major organisational change initiatives and has done this through a focus on people and outcomes. As a result of this experience, Terry has distilled his leadership and change expertise into the highly acclaimed Leadership Essentials program. Terry founded FuturePath International over 30 years ago, and today they are the leading providers of leadership development, coaching and change management within New Zealand and APAC. The FuturePath National Coaching Centre is the largest in New Zealand, with over 15 coaches who work both nationally and globally. FuturePath's promise is simply the best and nothing less. Terry has also been internationally recognised on a number of occasions and was awarded the CPI International Leadership Excellence Award for his contribution to change and transformation internationally. I'll now hand you over to Terry.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, that's always such a great introduction, sort of, as I always say, makes me blush a little. So welcome to everybody here today, and we have got an hour and a half which we're going to cover the last two modules. So today we're looking at module 5 initially, and this is around about how you build successful teams, set expectations, the golden rules around leadership, and then a couple of really good tools, the 30-day challenge and the 90-day performance commitment. We use both of them. I love both of them. I've used them with many teams and seen performance absolutely be transformed by using both the 30-day challenge and the 90-day commitment. And then the wrap-up module, the last module, is a personal one. It's around you being the best you, not the best that I think you could be or the best that somebody else thinks you could be, the best you. And that's around building a life practice. Because I don't see any leaders, I don't see any high performers that I work with, if they don't have a life practice of some sort, where they focus on what their belief systems are, how they manage stress, how they manage their energy, and in particular, the one that I'm really keen on is building resilience. That's really critical. If we go back to what we talked about in module 1, the changing world we're in, building resilience is really important. And then to wrap up, we've got some really good stuff for you to do in homework, which is my commitments, which will be at the back of the workbook. So like we've done on previous workbooks, we're going to actually call the page numbers out. We're not going to go through in lots of detail on some of these because we've got a lot to cover today. What I'd like to do is just talk about them. And as I've said many times, if anybody wants to call me, email me, very welcome to do it. So the first steps we've got today is 45, page 45, the 5 steps to creating high-performing teams. Great quote by Simon Sinek. Relationships are the foundations of all high-performing teams, and they are built on trust. I have never, ever seen a high-performing team that didn't have at the basis of it some form of trust. Now, that could be its culture, it could be its values, it could be its charter, it could be agreed behaviors, but high-performing teams are built on trust. And you can see we've got the 5 levels of high-performing teams. Patrick Lencioni, he talks about the 5 dysfunctions of teams, which are absolutely the opposite of these. So the first one is about building trust, and that comes from, guess who? And that comes from you as a leader. If you're leading a team, your team will model your behavior. They will model your values. They will model the things that you do. And the sad thing, I see so many managers and I see so many leaders go, hey, don't do what I do, just do what I tell you to do. And of course, people are not silly. People are relatively smart, and people will go, well, that doesn't make sense. You're telling me to do one thing and you're doing the opposite. And that's where you see cultures that come off the rails. That's where you see toxic cultures and you see non-performing cultures. We talked in module 1 about one of the most important things in leadership was about practice. And in module 2, we talked about change leadership, which was around authenticity. Authenticity in practice creates trust because, in my opinion, and this is my definition of trust, it's a promise that is repeatedly delivered on. So think about that. It's a promise that is repeatedly delivered on. And it doesn't matter what it is, but you'll go, hang on, I can trust that person because everything they ever said they're going to do, they do. Now, the interesting thing about trust is it doesn't take much to lose it. It doesn't take much to lose it. So I think the first thing you need to focus on is building trust in a team. I often see people go in to try and build focusing on results, number 5, and they don't succeed. We had a great example in the weekend. If those of you who follow rugby, the Wallabies beat the Springboks. Now, one would say that the Wallabies, I think they're rated number 7 in the world, maybe 8. They're not regarded as one of the great teams, but what Joe Schmidt has been able to do with them, he has been able to build trust. He's built trust in that team. He's mastered conflict. He's got commitment, accountability, and focused on results. You can't get mastering of conflict until you have trust with each other within a team. And once you're able to do that, you're able to resolve issues, you can move forward by achieving commitment. And if we go back and we talk about the transition framework we talked about in module 2, you have the 3 steps. Now, step 3 is a picture of what success looks like. That's what 5 is. That's what 5 is. And so once you've got people going, okay, I want to be in this team, we can resolve conflicts, we have ways of doing that, I feel committed, I feel I belong, and you own what you do, and you are clear about that picture of success, you will create a high-performing team. And I think, there's an interesting exercise we've got there on page 46. Go through and do it with your own team. Go through and see, how would you relate yourself out of 10? 10 being excellent, 1 being terrible. Where would you rate your team on a scale of 1 to 10? And then go down and look at the areas that you would want to improve. And the interesting thing is, remember that until you build trust, the rest of it won't follow. And we often see in sporting situations in particular, we see coaches focusing on results. They haven't gone back and focused on the building of the trust, mastering of the conflict, and getting commitment. Once you can get all of those in sequence and get them all embedded in your team, you will start to see transformational results. People will own what's happening. And I imagine, and I don't know, but I imagine that at Loftus Versfeld in the weekend, the Wallabies, who were 22 points down at halftime, took ownership. And they came out. Sure, they might have got luck. But the interesting thing is about high-performing teams create their own luck. So I think it was about accountability. They just decided, we're going to make this happen. And they did. And if you think about any high-performance individual or high-performing team, you'll find a common theme. So let's look at 47. There's another quote there by Simon Sinek, which follows on from what we're talking about. A team is not a group of people who work together. A team is a group of people who trust each other. And I have seen that many times when people go, okay, I believe. I believe. And I think the interesting thing about that is they will believe only and trust only in authentic leaders. And if the leader is like, do what I say, but not what I do, then people go, no, I don't trust you. So set expectations, manage these expectations. We can see here there's a really good model. You can work through it yourself around getting to know each other personally, discouraging cliques, discussing trust, and dealing with conflict. That's that second part that we've got there on page 45, managing conflict. Many managers don't like managing conflict. Why don't they like managing conflict? Well, because managing conflict at times can be really difficult. But if you don't manage conflict, you will not get accountability and you will not get commitment. Because people go, hang on, why can Terry do that and I can't? And why is Terry doing that when our behaviors or our values or our agreements are these? I worked with a team. It was about probably nearly 2.5 years ago. And this team, they brought me in to the team because it was really toxic. It was a real problematic team. And one of the things I did, I got the team in the room, was 10 of them. And I said to them, all right, we're going to spend half an hour to 3/4 of an hour talking about what are the real issues. And I got them to write it down so that it was not them saying it. They wrote it down and then they started talking about what those issues were. And it was amazing when they got it all out. And at the finish of it, I said to them, all right, what do you want to do in this team? And you know what they said to me? They said, we want to be successful, but we're not sure how. And I said, well, the first thing, let's write up on the board, on a whiteboard, the 5 behaviors that you're going to live by. And we got, I think, about 10 up, and then we voted on them. We got them down to 5, and we got everybody to come up and sign their name on that whiteboard that they would live by those behaviors and values. Then we took a photograph of it. And this was with the management team, a senior management team. And then I said to the chief executive, why don't we email this out to all 450 staff and say, this is what the managers have agreed to today. Call them on it. And he goes, that's a great idea. So there was a big collective gulp from that senior management team. It's like, we didn't really quite sign up for this. I go, does anybody have an issue with this? We're telling your people, this is what you've agreed. You've signed it. It's photographed. They can call you on it. And they all went, yeah, okay. So it was emailed out. I got a call from the chief executive 2 weeks later. He said, it's just phenomenal. He said, you would not believe the change that we have got across this whole organization, because he said people are calling their managers on it. Managers are actually changing their behaviors. He said, look, the whole energy of this organization has shifted and changed. And I think that's a really big thing for humans. Humans, we need to see consistency and we need to see behaviors that we all agreed on being lived. So to do that, you need to be on page 49, setting expectations. Great quote there from Jared Silver by saying, doing things is not the same as getting things done. Doing things is not the same as getting things done. People can go do stuff, but it may not be the important stuff. It may not be what your goal is. It may be not what you agreed on. It may not be what the expectations were that were set. And what is really important, and we've talked about this in the other modules, is when you do set expectations, absolutely critical that you make sure that everybody understands what they are and, more importantly, what they mean. Here's an example. If I said to you, what makes great customer service? If I had 10 people in a room and I asked 10 people what makes great customer service, I would guarantee I'd get at least 8 opinions that were different. And they would all be said with good intent. They would all be said with commitment, and people would really believe in them. And they'd go off and try to make them happen. But we've got 10 people heading in 8 different directions. That's why it's really important when you're setting expectations to communicate very clearly and then use reflective listening to get a clear understanding of what that person understands about those expectations. And then it's getting a commonality of agreement. We run a program called Vision to Action, which is a strategic planning program. I built it 31 years ago. It is truly outstanding. And why is it truly outstanding? It's truly outstanding because the first thing we do is we look at the 5 things that will shift the dial over 18 months. Then we come back and we define what the word, like let's say one of them is to improve customer service. We come back and we go, what do we mean by improve? What do we mean by customer service? And we get commonality of agreement before we move on. So what it means is that everybody is all working together. They're all working together. And we see that in synergy, we see that in sport. You've seen teams, and we talked about the Wallabies in the weekend. All of a sudden they came together and they grew arms and legs. It's like the word I love is synergy, isn't it? Because synergy is when 2 and 2 equal 8. You get the whole is much greater than the individual parts of it. So I think, focus on expectations and be clear about them, get agreement on them, and then give feedback on them. So that is why it's really important that if you are a leader, you also need to be a coach. So you're going to be moving between, if you want to master high performance, you're going to move between manager, which is getting stuff done, leader, which is changing how people see where they're going and bringing people together into a common picture of success, and a coach. A coach is a person who enables people, who is like a people whisperer, who's able to look at their talents and say to them, well, this is the expectations we have. You have the ability to do that, and showing and helping people realize their capability, or showing them where that capability is and what they're capable of. And I've seen many, many cases over the years. And I had a person many years ago, his name was Boyd, and he was in a role which was really difficult. And when we took it over, we were like, yeah, Boyd was probably 3 or 4 out of 10, but we worked with Boyd again around his ability. And 3.5 years later, when the business was sold, he wrote me a lovely letter which says the last 3.5 years of his life were the best 3.5 years of his life. And he'd gone from 4 to an 8.5. We didn't make it happen. He made it happen. We just created the environment. And part of that was around setting expectations. And they weren't performance expectations, funnily enough, with Boyd. They were expectations around, this is what I see in you. This is what I believe in you. This is what I know you're capable of. So it was translating expectations into a different framework. Now, in some cases, you're going to set concrete KPI type expectations, but in other cases, you're going to set expectations around, I believe in you. I believe you have this capability. And we all know what happens when that happens. People all of a sudden, in the right circumstances, will rise to the occasion, and we will see transformation. On page 49 is a law of limited performance. And I love this quote because I just see this happening so many times across so many organizations. The quote is, people soon discover the level of performance their managers will settle for, and then they gravitate to that level. Managers assume that this is all these people are capable of achieving. And so they accept it and stop challenging them to be better. So both reinforce what the other believes. So when you get a moment later, have a read through this again and think about it and think, yeah, the great leaders, the great managers, and the great coaches all can see and believe in possibilities. They can all see and believe in potential. And one of the great successes I feel that I've had throughout my career and in leading the organizations that I've had and working with the people I've had is being able to see what the potential of a person is, seeing what their capability is, and being able to articulate it back to them in terms of either expectations or, as I see, a picture of them. I had a person that we brought on board, and this person, people said to me, why are you bringing this person on board as a coach? And I said, because this person has the ability to be a great coach. I can see the humanity in this person as well as the structure. And today that person would be one of our very best coaches, gets amazing feedback, and has transformed. The interesting thing, when I first spoke to her about being a coach, she said, but I'm not a coach. I don't think I could ever be a coach. And I articulated to her why I thought she could be. And today, she is that. She is that. And she's done that herself, not me. She's done that herself. All I did was I created the environment. So if you're running a team of people, go and look at them and say, how many of them are gravitating to the law of limited performance? And what do you need to do to shift them off that plateau? What do you need to do to change how it is? And everybody's not the same. So don't try and work with people all the same. You need to understand what will be the leverage point. I think there was a Greek philosopher called Archimedes, wasn't it? He said, if you give me a lever long enough, I can shift the world. I always think about that in leadership. You just got to actually sit and listen and study the person and understand what will motivate them. What is their intrinsic talent, and how do you actually take that talent and set it alight? And at the end of the day, it's always that individual person's choice. But sometimes people's environment and upbringing, as we talked about in previous modules, they haven't been able to reframe their thinking. I had a person that I work with, and I just saw great potential in this person as a coach. And this person said to me, why do you think I'll be a great coach? And I said, you're like a bud on a tree that is going to flower. And she looked at me and she said, wow. But what I've done was I created a picture in her mind of what she could become. And she has. She has. Again, very different to the other person I talked about, very different approach. One was about touching on their humanity. Another one was about giving them a picture of how they would bloom as a coach. So I think as a leader, you need to study people. And to study people, you need to listen to them. And you need to watch the things they do in their lives and their patterns. But most importantly, you need to know yourself, me. So on page 50 and 51, we have there the 10 golden rules of leadership. And I'd suggest you take some time, read through it and make your notes. It's a PDF fillable workbook that we have here today. Make some notes. But what's leadership? You know, to me, leadership is about creating the environment where people can aspire to be. You've got trust, you've got authenticity, and you create the picture of success. And if you look at all great leaders, people have followed them. People have followed them. So the 10 golden rules of leadership, in my opinion, are the ones that we have listed down here. Know yourself. Know yourself. So many leaders I see today don't know themselves. They are really managers trying to be leaders. And leaders are people who help transform other people. They create environments and they create spaces where people can be the best they choose to be. Focus on your inner person. I talked a wee bit about a life practice a moment ago. And one of the things that happens today with a lot of people is they don't examine themselves. What's happening in my world? What do I need to change in my world? It's like, this is who I am, and I'll probably be like this forever, and there's circumstances in the world change me. Now, we work with people going through all kinds of life changes, you know, sometimes redundancy, all sorts of changes. And sometimes it is those kind of drastic changes in one's life that actually gets people to go, I need to make a change. And that's good if they do that. But my challenge to you is build a life practice where you're constantly looking at change, where you're constantly looking at what do I need to be the best version of myself. Nurture community. Look, humans are social animals. And we need whānau around us, we need networks around us, we need people around us who support us and who will be there for us, who can give us guidance, who can give us wisdom, who can talk to. We all need that. So build your networks and build your community. Focus on the realistic. Look, you know, we've all sat and listened to people who have dreams. And I'm not against dreams. I'm a big believer in dreams. If you talk to my daughter and said, what is the one thing I keep saying to her? I always say, follow your dreams. There's a caveat. Be realistic about it. be realistic about it. I learned it many years ago, and sadly, I was a pretty good rugby player, played a lot of rep rugby when I was younger, aspired to become an All Black. That was my dream. But the reality set in when I realized I wasn't fast enough, big enough, tall enough, or whatever enough to become an All Black. And so what I did was I got into coaching and I fulfilled my dreams in other ways. Be realistic, but don't ever give up on your dreams. Embrace the truth. Now, truth is a bit like being realistic. It's a bit like reality. It's a bit like being authentic. It's a mixture of all those. It's a nice way to put it, embrace the truth. As I've said many times in all of these modules, people aren't silly. People can spot fake real quick. People are smart. So people can work out when people aren't embracing the truth. People can work out when people are being false. And nobody will follow a false leader. Reveal talent, create platforms that releases ingenuity, releases the creativity of your people, particularly your teams. Look, there's so much amazing talent around. And part of us as leaders and as coaches and as managers is creating the environment where everybody can actually build their talent and let it grow. I've seen this so many times, and particularly in both sporting teams and in business situations where you have one manager or one leader and the team is not performing that well. A new person comes in, same team, same office, same space, or same sporting area, and that team takes off and grows and flourishes. What's the difference? I think one of them is nurturing talent. One of them is actually seeing those people, not just hearing them and observing them, but seeing them. And I think when people felt seen and they felt safe and trusted, going back to that high performance team, the 5 levels, people transform. One of the things I believe a leader is that they have a duty of care to their people. They have a duty of care to their organization. But the key thing is a duty of care to their people. That's number one. Often I see people having a focus on KPIs, performance, and all of those. And I'm not saying don't. I think that's important. It's very important. Best way to get it is have a duty of care to your people and then inspire your people to achieve those, and then you will achieve all your performance targets. That's about what I call living to a higher code. It's calling upon yourself as a leader to say, do I have a duty of care to my people? And if you don't, build it into your practice, build it into your life practice, your leadership practice, whatever practice you decide to build it into that, and then focus on it and work on it like you would in any other practice. I may have mentioned, but I love it, it's like Long Long. Many of you don't even probably know Long Long, or you'd call him Lang Lang. He's the world's greatest pianist. He started playing when he was 3. And today he practices somewhere like 6 to 7 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's why he can play 2 or 3 hours of music on a piano in a concert hall brilliantly without music sitting on the piano. Practice. So part of building that higher code is challenging yourself and building that leadership practice. Challenge and reframe. We've talked about that in Module 1 and Module 2, is that in a changing world that we're in, if you don't adapt, challenge yourself, reframe your thinking, reframe your actions, you'll be doing stuff that is based on your past. And that would be a bit like using a rotary dial phone on a cable instead of your smartphone. And sometimes we don't see it because it's actions and we go, well, that's who I am. But if you want to be successful, you need to challenge and reframe and adapt. Big skills for the future. Personal integrity. And we've talked about this a lot. This is where trust comes from. This is where duty of care comes from. And character is destiny. People follow leaders with character. Why? It's because They inspire them. They give them the ability to look beyond themselves and go, wow, that person is living, walking, breathing what they're talking about. I was fortunate about a year ago to talk to a person I was coaching who had spent 5 days with Nelson Mandela. And I said, so what was Nelson Mandela like? He said, amazing, amazing, just an amazing man. He said, if there's a person who has character with destiny, that was Nelson Mandela. He said he had a genuine feel and a genuine love of people that you felt. And then he said to me, he said, but his security, he used to drive his security nuts because he'd go to his hotel room at 9 o'clock. And he said at 10 past 9, he'd wander out in his dressing gown. He'd be wandering around the hotel, just talking to people. And his security like, Nelson, please go back into your room where you're safe. And he's like, no, I need to talk to people. And I always think of that story as the ultimate sort of manifestation of character in leadership. So how do we build? We've been talking a bit about how you build a leadership practice, how you build a practice, how you get good at what you do. And it's interesting because, you know, my favorite thinking at the moment is if Razor Robinson, who's the coach of the All Blacks, said, well, we're not going to do any more practice. We're just going to turn up and hope for the best. People would be horrified. The challenge is, do we turn up for life? Do we turn up for career? Do we turn up for whānau? Do we turn up for relationships? Do we turn up for all the things in our lives, such as leadership, without practice? Or should we be practicing them? Personally, I have a life practice, and I would look at that life practice every single day. And I'm also going to talk a little bit later about one of the practices that I think is very powerful in that, which is a gratitude practice, which builds resiliency. We'll talk about this later today. But you need to have a practice. You need to be challenging yourself and saying, why do I act in this way? Why do I respond in this way? My guess is part of it will go back to your past, and probably some of it will go right back to your childhood. And then you've got to say, well, do I want to be like that, or do I want to change? And people go, well, change is hard. Of course, change is hard. But here's the universal fact that under stress or pressure, humans revert to learned behavior. So something you might have learned when you were 5 years of age could be the driver of your actions right now, today, as an adult, when you're under pressure. And you go, well, how do I change that? Well, on page 52, we have a tool there that you can use to change. It's called the 30-day challenge. It's a simple tool and it's a hard tool, but it works. Trust me. I've used it hundreds of times. I've seen people who've used it hundreds of times. So what you do is you set your 30-day goal. You say, what do I want to do? Why do I want to do it? What will I achieve? And what is the completion date? If you're going to do it, don't start with more than one. Use one to start with. So let's imagine a really horrifying example. It's like, I'm going to give up ice cream. Now I can hear the collective gasp of horror across the country when I say that. But let's imagine you're going to give up ice cream for 30 days and you go, what will I achieve? And you might go, well, help me lose weight. 30-day challenge goes like this. Every night before you go to sleep, you go, did I eat ice cream today? And if the answer is no, tick. Another day done. Another day done. Another day done. But if one night you're standing there thinking, I didn't eat ice cream, technically, but I did lick my child's spoon, which had ice cream on it, you go back to 0 and you start again. Now, I promise you, on your 4th or 5th iteration, and you're at 20 days, you will be obsessed about not going back to 0. And what will happen is when you get to 30 days, you will have a new behavior. A new behavior. So I used to love ice cream, so I did this with ice cream, right? It took me about 4 iterations before I could get to my 30 days of not eating ice cream. And at 20 days, the thing that kept me going and stopped me eating anything was the fact that I promised myself at the end of 30 days I was going to eat a big tub of chocolate chip ice cream. And I got to 30 days and I couldn't even look at it. And to this day, I can take or leave ice cream. It doesn't rock my world at all. And if I get stressed, where once I might have liked to eat ice cream, I wouldn't even go near it, wouldn't even enter my thinking. So if you want to change behaviors, use the 30-day challenge. Now, if you look at what Weight Watchers used to do, and you look at what Jenny Craig used to do, they used the same principle, just structured in a different way. But it's a really effective way to change your thinking. Let's imagine you think, I want to actually state my opinions rather than go, oh, it's just nice, hypothetically. So you do that for 30 days. In the 30 days, you'll be doing things differently because you have a new behavior, and under stress, you will revert to the new behavior because now it is your learned behavior. So it's a very powerful tool for change. The other one that we got here is the 90-day performance commitment. And I like this one because it's a really great tool to use with teams. You could call it the 90-day sprint.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Sorry, my phone, my friend, the Siri person. So on the 90-day performance commitment, it is wonderful to use with teams because you can get a sprint together. I had a team that I've worked with for 8 years. When I first started working with them, they were a risk-averse team, pretty negative, and they were working for a major bank in a risk area. So their job was really always saying no to people who came to them and said, can we get loans and can we do these things? We did a lot of work, but one of the things we did was we did 90-day sprints or 90-day performance commitments. And when I walk into that team now, you can feel it vibrating because that team has focused on success for 8 years. It has achieved its 90-day commitments for 8 years. Guess what its learned behavior is? Success. They know they can achieve anything. In their last customer survey, and this is from their internal people, who they're generally saying no to or challenging them, they scored 98% customer satisfaction. And that would be unheard of 8 years before. What it's done is it's shifted their thinking. So if you're going to do this with your team, start again small. Set purpose, the actions you're going to do, the measures, and the completion date, which is 90 days out. And I would suggest that when you start it, you make it relatively simple or relatively achievable for the first one. Not easy, but not hard. But they got to do a bit of a stretch to get it. And when they get it, you got to do one thing, which is celebrate. Now, I might have shared this with you before. The greatest things to celebrate are muffins and coffee, and failing muffins, a packet of chocolate bickies. Always works. Always works. Don't go crazy. You don't need to. But it's about team feeling we have succeeded and we are celebrating. Very, very important connection. And then for the next 3 months, you might set 2. You might set 3. Never go above 5. But what will happen, you will start creating a culture of success. The vision to action that I mentioned earlier around strategic planning has been built on this principle. And that is why it's probably one of the most successful strategic planning tools I've ever seen. It transforms performance easily because all of a sudden people go, but we're the team that succeeds. We always get stuff done. And I have seen people, as we say, grow arms and legs because all of a sudden they're really, really, really successful. For those of you who have played in sporting teams, you might have noticed at times in sporting teams, you'll come up against teams who just have an ability to think differently and have a belief in themselves that is different. And it used to be said, for example, about the All Blacks, is that when they ran onto the paddock, they were 6 points ahead. Now that's changed because again, other teams have worked and got better, but again, it's that ethos. And if any one of you have had the chance of reading that book called Legacy by Peter Kerr, which is written about the All Blacks, it's about the legacy that they want to leave. It is not about the individual, it is about the team. And with the All Black team, it's a great book around, if you're looking at it from a performance perspective, great book to read. But it's about what legacy will you leave the jersey? And that's the words they use. So I think, all of these things, when you put them together, it's about building great teams. It's about getting people to believe in their capabilities and their talents. It's about creating the environment, the safe environment, where individuals can become their best self, the best self that they choose, not what you choose. I've seen so many times managers go, this is the kind of person I believe you could be. I don't know why you can't be this. And you go, well, because they haven't chosen to be that. You've got to get people to choose their best self. So let's moving on to module 6 when we've got on page 55. Part of becoming a great leader, a part of becoming a great manager, part of becoming a great coach, part of creating a high performance environment is to be a high performer yourself. And it's about building that life practice that enables you to put all of what we've talked about in the previous 5 modules together and be that leader that actually people look at and go, wow, that person is modeling what I aspire to be, or that person is creating the environment where I know I can excel. We've all heard that old saying, people don't leave organizations, they leave managers. And it's pretty much true in my experience, pretty much true. And it was fascinating, about 3 years ago, we were doing a whole lot of employee surveys for a fairly large organization. And guess what the reason, what came up in these surveys, these were exit interviews, what came up in these exit interview surveys was their managers. They were leaving because of their managers. We took it back to the senior management team and gave them this information, and they went, oh, we think it's other situations. We think it's salary. We think it's working conditions, a whole lot of other things. And so in the finish, we said, look, we're wasting your money by doing this because you don't want to acknowledge the facts. But your turnover is very high because your managers are creating climates where people go, I don't need this in my life. I don't want to work here. So how do we actually make sure that we, as a leader, as a coach, as a manager, are at our best? Well, one of the things that I think is really important is looking at individual wellness. And wellness is a really interesting topic for me because I've done a lot of work on aging. We have a program called Life Architects, which I've built, which we deliver internationally. And I've done a lot of research and a lot of work on aging and consequently on health. And wellness is at the core of this. And so let's quickly run through these, and you spend time yourself on page 55 going through these and building what I would call a life practice for yourself. Intellectual wellness. This is one that I think at times many people leave on the table. They don't focus on intellectual wellness. Look, put it simply, if you're curious and you're open to learning and you're open to reframing and adapting, you're going to have intellectual wellness. Research has also shown the more curious you are and the more learning focused you are, it is also something that pushes dementia diseases back. Emotional wellness. It's about being able to acknowledge your feelings. Many, many years ago, many of you may have watched videos around vulnerability and various things like that. We don't talk about that so much today, but I encourage when you bring teams of people together is to create a safe situation like Chatham House rules. We're going to have a conversation that what we say here stays here, we use a tool called undiscussables. And people can write down what it is that they're really feeling, that bothering them, or something they need an answer to. And then you can sit and have a conversation about it. It's anonymous. It's a powerful tool at people being able to say what they want to feel. Because we all know when you say to people something that deals emotionally or makes them feel vulnerable, they go, oh, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm good. Occupational wellness. You know, there's that old saying, find your passion and you'll never work a day in your life. Challenge yourself. Are you working in your passion? You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised when you talk to our coaches, the amount of people we work with who have got into roles because they fell into them. They went to university and did a degree that was a simple degree, so they got into it because of that. Their parents said to them, this is what you need to do, or. But it's surprising how many people haven't made an intentional decision. And we often find when they get to 50, they go, hang on, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I had a financial controller, and she'd come from a country which was fairly structured. And I said to her one day, why did you become an accountant? She said, well, my father said to me, you can either become an accountant, lawyer, a minister, an architect, or a doctor. I think they were the five. It was 5 things. I think they were the 5. So she said, I picked accountant. And she was a real serious accountant as well. And I said, but what did you want to be? She said, I wanted to be a ballerina. And I'm like, I just felt awful. And then she said something that made me almost cry, because she said, my cousin, same age as me, was given the same choice. And she said to the family, I don't care, I'm going to become a ballerina. And she said, today she travels the world teaching ballet. And the sadness about that is that the person I was talking to probably would have loved to have done the same thing. She wasn't an accountant. And so I think part of occupational wellness is find your passion and challenge yourself around that, which is the reframing and adaptability. Make sure you're in the situations, environmental wellness, situations where you feel that your workspace is going to positively impact upon you. Financial wellness, you know, it's important. It's people say money doesn't make you happy, and that's true, but it helps, you know, it helps. And so I think you work out for yourself what level is going to make you comfortable, or to the point where you have a balance. You have a balance. Look, I've seen people who've gone obsessed with money and it hasn't worked for them. And the funny thing about it is that I made a choice many years ago. I could have gone on to make a lot of money, but I chose not to, because I didn't like who I would become if I continued down that route. Now, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today if I had made that decision. Do I regret it? No. Best decision of my life. Also probably one of the hardest. Spiritual wellness. Now, we don't talk a lot about this, but I think it's around you in your own way, finding, let's call it spiritual wellness or being or whatever you want to call it. It's why are you here? What do you want to leave behind? What is your legacy? It could be, I want to be the greatest grandparent, or I want to be the greatest parent, or whatever it may be. That's whatever it is that is your purpose on this life. That's where I see the spiritual wellness, because you start to get an alignment of harmony. Physical wellness, again, it's really important. And again, in the aging work that I've done, is, you know, some simple stuff. It's about movement. It's about what we eat. What we think reflects also on our physical wellness. And social wellness. I mean, humans are social animals. And so humans need to have whānau around them. That's their support structure, that cares about them and that love them. And I think, you know, it's a really important thing. Was my mum said to me about 2 or 3 years ago, she's passed now, but she said to me 2 or 3 years ago, what do you think is the most important thing in the world? If you could do one thing in the world, what would it be? I said, I would get everybody to be kind to each other. Imagine a world where everybody every day is being kind to each other. And that is sort of pretty much around that social wellness. It's around what humans are about. So now let's get into something that's really interesting on page 56. I love this quote by Jim Rohn, right? If you don't plan your life, you will live somebody else's plan. And guess what? They really don't have much planned for you. I just love that because it's so true. And yet you often see, and you will probably see in your own life, where people go, but I need to live that person's plan, or they're telling me what to do, or my family's expectations of these things. Try to build your life practice around what's important for you, especially what's on page 55. All these things on page 55, that's what's important. And if you can build your life around that and reframe. So that model that we've got at the top of page 56 is a really, really important model. Most people look to renew when they're right at the bottom on the right-hand side. You see organizations that do that. Kodak, for example, it was right up the top on that purpose, and then it descended right to the bottom and tried to reinvent itself, and it didn't work, did it? And we see that's a life cycle. That's a typical life cycle. Now, the way to reinvigorate that life cycle is to leverage off that upward curve towards the top, leverage off it into that renewal. And that's a practice, because you might go, I'm pretty comfortable. And you might go, yeah, but I need to challenge myself right now because I'm comfortable. And I've had to do that recently with myself. I'm thinking, like, I go to Sydney quite regularly, and I like Sydney. It's one of my favorite cities. And then I thought to myself, hang on, I am going there too much. I need to do something different. So I am really doing something different in October, traveling to a place I've never been to in my life, would never probably go to in my life. Why? Because I wanted to challenge myself and open myself up to new ideas and new ways of thinking. So there's a really good little planner there. Write down what you want to renew, the action, the outcome, the date, and any notes. Because if you continuously do that, you start building that diagram over on page 57, and from the great Arnold Schwarzenegger. Strength does not come from winning. Your struggles develop your strengths. When you go through hardships to decide not to surrender, that is strength. Now, everybody probably has an opinion about Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm not saying he's the greatest person in the world or not, but I read his book many years ago about his struggle when he came from Austria to America. And this is where this quote comes from. Yeah, he went through a real struggle to get to who he is today, or what he's become. So look at that and go through that 18 things that mentally strong people do and go, how many of these can I tick? How many of these do I need to work on? How many of these don't I do? You know? And there's a great one down there on the right-hand side. They invest their energy in the present. They invest their energy in the present. One of the big secrets about high performers is managing energy, not tasks and not time. Energy. Part of managing energy is going back to page 55 and looking at all those wellness areas there and going, how am I doing in all of those? What do I need to change in my life? What is working for me and what doesn't work for me? And I can tell you, even in my life, every probably month or 2 months, I'd be changing something to do something differently. I would be listening to another podcast, or I'd be reading another book, or I'd be learning something different. Like, for example, I gave up watching TV probably 8 years ago. I don't have a TV. I don't watch TV. And a friend of mine said recently, oh, did you see this Netflix thing? And I went, I don't have TV. And I went, whoa, how could you live without TV? I said, look, honestly, I don't have time in my life to watch TV. Because what I'd worked out was, years ago, that was dead time. Yeah, sure, I could go, I liked it. I'd just sit there and watch it, you know. But I thought to myself, Is it getting me where I want to go in terms of page 55, in terms of all those areas of wellness? And the answer was no. Doesn't mean I'm perfect by any means. I'm not. Definitely not. But what it means is that I'm now focusing on my energy, how I manage my energy. And one of the most important things with energy is sleep. One of the most important things that refuels you. And in all the aging work that I have done, same thing. If you want to look at one thing that will transform your life, good sleep. Good sleep. So let's look at page 58, patterns and limitations. And again, this comes back to, what we talked about was about reframing. It was about thinking differently about things in our lives, how we did things differently, challenging them. We talked about in module 1 and module 2 about the changing world we're in, a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Things are radically changing. Is that other thing that we talk about all the time. If you've ever looked at LinkedIn, all you see on LinkedIn is AI. AI is going to do everything. AI won't. It's going to transform our lives. There is no doubt about that. It'll transform health in particular really quickly. And I was talking to an oncologist about a year or more ago, and he said it is transforming how we treat cancer. He said, what we're able to do is we're able to drill down on treatments and ways in which we can treat people that we haven't been able to do before. So yes, it's going to change our lives. But think about this. A client said to me recently, what's the big thing that you need to focus on in the future? I said, making decisions. People don't like making decisions. People keep putting off making decisions. So I could tell you what you need to do, but if you're going to actually put a project team together and spend a whole lot of time scoping it and then spend a whole lot of time thinking about it and not making a decision on to do it, by the time you get round to doing it, the thing may have changed, may have been resolved, may not exist. So I think this is where patterns of limitation are really important, because we've got to go back and say, why are we spending so much time on making decisions, for example, when we know that 80 to 85% of information is about as accurate as 95? But in that space between 80 and 85 and 90, that's where you lose traction. The other part of it is here, we've also got self-limiting beliefs. So the self-limiting beliefs are, I'm not good enough. And part of them is, I need more information because I'm fearful of making a mistake. All these self-limiting beliefs are going to affect what we do and how we do it. So I think one of the big things that we need to focus on is awareness. This is where life practice becomes important. Imagine now that your greatest investment that you're going to make is you. The biggest investment that you're going to make is in you. Not in your house, not in your car, not in your rental properties or whatever it is. Your biggest investment is you. So it's you for two things. It's you for your career, but it's also you for the life that you wish to live, the quality of life you wish to live. I was coaching a senior manager recently, and he wanted to know what would make happiness. And when we wrote everything up on the whiteboard of what would create happiness, he goes, I can't do that. I go, why not? He said, well, if I did that, I would probably not be married. I said, well, but if by doing that makes you happy, why don't you sit with your partner and talk about it? And he goes, oh, no, can't do that. And again, those were a whole lot of limiting beliefs that this person had. And I'm not suggesting that there was a simple solution to this, because what had happened, this person had created so many things in this person's life that some of them were almost very, in his mind, very impossible to change. I don't think they were, but in his mind they were, which I respect. It's about challenging our beliefs and being aware of them, and then saying, what is my life practice? What do I want to create in my life? Or what do I want to create in my career? What kind of relationship do I want to have in my family? What kind of health do I want to have? What kind of life do I want to live? And we're all different. Like, we're all different. Like, if you take, I'm one of 8 kids, and if you take my siblings, we're all very different, and we all have very different aspirations in our lives. The key thing is knowing what you want in yours. Challenge your beliefs. Look, our beliefs are embedded in us from the time we're kids. We get them reinforced with experiences over life, and unless we examine them, and I think there was some wise person said, a life not examined is a life not well lived. It's examining your beliefs and saying, are they going to deliver what I want out of my life? Do you know what the big thing is? A lot of people don't know what they want out of their life. They know what they want out of their job, but not out of their life. So my challenge to you is, if you are a person who goes, I'm not sure what I want about my life, look at what your legacy is going to be. What do you want people to remember you for? A great one we had was a few years ago, and I might have mentioned this in one of the early modules. If I have, forgive me. But one of our coaches was working with a senior manager in a financial services business. He was about mid-50s. And she said, what do you want as a legacy? And he goes, I don't know. So guess what she did? She sent him home to think about it. The following week, what do you want as your legacy? He said, I want to be the world's greatest granddad. I want to be the world's greatest granddad. And she said, what are you doing about it? He said, absolutely nothing. So she sent him away to do something about it. And he came back the following week. And I love this story because it's not about money, which often these kind of stories end up being about. This was about something really powerful. She said to him, did you do something about your legacy? He said, yep. He said, I'm only working 3 days a week now. And on the other 2 days, he said, I make my grandkids lunches. I pick them up from my daughters. I take them to school. I pick them up after school, take them back to her place. I make them a meal. I help them with their homework. And on Saturdays, I'm taking them to sports. Now, just think about that. What a fantastic legacy that is. But he made a choice. He made a choice that his career was second to his legacy. And I love that kind of thinking. Not for everybody. I'm not suggesting everybody should. I'm just saying, in your own world, whatever works for you, find what your legacy is. That will mean you've got to challenge yourself. It will mean you need to reframe. And it may mean you need to seek support from people around you as you go through this transition. But take action. Take action. I mean, one of the big things I think is about actions, and we talked about this in one of the previous modules. If you want to achieve goals, use micro actions. Micro actions become habits. Habits become behaviors. Behaviors help you get to your goals. So take action. One of the wisest things I learned many years ago was, even if you're having a bad day, set yourself one goal out of that day. It might be a small goal, but do it. And at the end of that day, no matter how bad your day might be, you go, I still kept moving forward. I still kept moving forward. And practice self-compassion. Be kind to yourself. So often, people will beat up on themselves. And when we're coaching people, we hear that a lot, you know, oh, well, I'm not good enough to do that, or I'm not this, or I failed in this and that. Don't. It's a learning journey that we're all on. And if you want to master high performance, you need to embrace learning. You need to understand that when you don't succeed, and I don't like using the word fail, when you don't succeed, sit and learn. Why did I not succeed? What was the reasons? Reframe it, readapt it, and off you go again. That's the secret to high performance. But it's also the secret to something called a practice. Because if you think about anybody who practices, they're constantly looking at improvement. They're constantly looking at change. They're constantly looking at how they can be better at what they do. I don't think Long goes in and sits at his piano every morning and says, I'm going to play the same stuff every morning. He sits there and goes, I'm having really a big piece of problem in interpreting this piece of music, and I'm going to try and do it differently. So how do we do this? Because one of the things I think that's important for us to think about is what we've got on page 59, managing stresses. Now, we all know that there's good stressors and there's bad stressors, and we also get into habits. Many years ago, I used to hate writing. There was a report I had to write all the time, and I hated writing them. So I convinced myself the best way to write this report was to leave it to the last minute, and panic and desperation gave me creativity. And it did, it worked, but it wasn't good for me. And then I remember sitting down and saying, I want to change this. I want to reframe this. I don't want to do this anymore. And it was even like on Sunday, yesterday, I had to start a workbook that we're building, a brand new workbook, and it's a real problematic one. And I set myself a time at 3 o'clock. I sat down and I said, okay, I can sit here for an hour thinking about it if I want. But I'm not going to get up from this desk until I've actually started it. And 10 minutes later, I thought I'm going to write something, and then I threw all that out. But then all of a sudden, probably 15 minutes later, it became quite clear to me what I needed to write. It was there. So again, once I would have put that off until a week before we needed to start delivering these seminars to have this workbook written, then I'd been in panic mode. I'd be getting grumpy. I certainly wouldn't be getting into page 55 around wellness. I would be in unwellness. So it's about looking at what we need to change and what we can and can't control. We also, as humans, tend to focus on the no control circle a lot. No control circle a lot. And it was very, very relevant. I had a family member who had been diagnosed with a form of cancer about 2 months ago. And it was really interesting how my siblings reacted. Some siblings were going, this is terrible, it's terrible, and everything that happened was terrible. And yet I was going, okay, it's about small wins, because some of the stuff you can't control. Focus on what you can control. It was an interesting dynamic in how people saw the situation. And now when I was talking to my sister yesterday, she's going, I think I'm pretty clear, which is wonderful news. Wonderful news. But it was her focusing on what she could control, not what she couldn't. So I think the question is, does it add value to me or take happiness away? Does it take away peace? Does it take away joy? Then we shouldn't be focusing on it. If it takes away happiness, peace, or joy, why do I allow it in my life? Now, those people who know me know I have one saying: would you wash your face in sulfuric acid? And everybody's like, no, crazy. Not unless you wanted a facial peel, but even that's probably a bit extreme. No, why would you do that? Sulfuric acid on your face? No. And yet we allow the same kind of stuff to come into our brains. We allow the same kind of influences to come into our lives of people who take away our peace and our joy and our happiness. And guess what it does? It affects page 55. It affects our wellness. It affects our wellness. Now, I could spend probably most of the afternoon talking to you about why it does, but we don't have time for that. But you think about the things that have upset you, or the people who have upset you, and how it's made you feel. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Move them out of your life. Don't have people in your life who are negative influences, who are always trying to pull you down to their level. Move them out of your life. Any things that are toxic or negative in your life, move them out of your life. Last year, I had a person I've known for 20 years, and he'd changed. He'd gone overseas. He had become really focused on money and a whole lot of things. He'd changed. It was sad. And I had to make the decision, do I want this kind of person in my life or not? And the answer was no. And so we sat down and we had a conversation. And I said, look, you're not a positive influence in my life anymore. And he goes, oh, you know, that's how you see it. And well, we've been friends. I went, no, I think it's time for us all to move on. Some people might say that's a bit harsh. I don't think it was. It was me protecting my wellness. It was me focusing on what I can control and what I can't. I can't control that person, and I don't like what they do to me. So if you look at page 60, go through some of those. And I mean, there's a quote from myself. Choice is an option for us all. We choose to live the lives we want to create. We often hear people going, oh, this is the problem. And you're going, you can solve that problem by making a choice. But have you? But will you? And if you won't and haven't, then you should be silent, because that's another choice you've made. You've made a choice to accept what it is. So life is a choice. And in that choice comes the quality of life that we choose for ourselves. So one of these key things about performance is around choice. A person who is a peak athlete, a person who's a peak musician, a person who's a peak performer in any field that I've ever worked in, they make choices. They make lots of choices, and generally they're choices around things that they need to change and things they need to remove from their lives, or things that they don't wish to do or they wish to give up in order to get where they want to go. So there's a really great graphic there. What I can control, what I can't control is a really great graphic there. Look at that and see where you get affected. We all have these things that do affect us. I mean, you know, I probably go, oh, what do people think of me? And I've really got to work on that at times. When people might go, sometimes I got to really work on how I speak to myself, some of my self-thoughts. Because how we choose, how we think, how we talk to ourselves, how we look at those things we control or don't control, affects page 55, which is wellness, but it also affects page 61, which is our energy sources. So we have 4. Now, I was running a workshop a while back, and there was a person who said to me, there is a 5th energy source. And I went, what is that? And they went, sleep. I thought they were joking. And so I went, yeah, I sort of chuckled and laughed and looked at them, and they went, whoops, Terry, they're serious. And so we wrote up a 5th energy source, which was sleep. So if you have a 5th energy source or a 6th energy source, include it. But the 4 main ones are physical, mental, emotional, and being. And being goes back to our spiritual one we talked about before. So why is this important? Well, I think why it's important is certain things will motivate us. Like I'm motivated by mental. That would be my probably dominant thing. I like thinking about things. I like innovating. I like making things happen. I like creating things. And that's one of the reasons I started Future Path 31 years ago. I also know that when I get highly stressed, I tend to overcomplicate stuff in the mental. I get congested. I call it congestion. I get congested in my head. So what do? I know that if I do that, I need to do physical. So I live in Auckland. I can walk around Victoria Park. It's a 10-minute park. I can walk around that. It's easy to walk around. I can walk around that for, say, an hour and a half. And I can talk to myself and think through this stuff that's in my head that's congesting me. I come out an hour and a half later. I'm decongested. I have used that physical energy to change my mental energy. It helps with my fitness as well, so that's a bonus. But I know what I need to do to change it. Now, if you're an emotive person, guess what you've got to do? You've got to find somebody that you trust, that you can talk to, somebody who's going to listen to you, because by getting it out, by talking it out, you start to change the stress levels. You start to rebalance your stress. Now, I use the word rebalance because often we talk about, oh, I need to have all my energy sources in balance. You never will. I've never seen it. I think you need to have them in harmony. At times they will be higher and lower, but the secret is knowing yourself, knowing what happens under certain circumstances where you go to, particularly under stress. I had a person in a workshop, and the person said to me, what is being? I said, well, it could be your legacy. It could be your spirituality, could be religion, could be whatever you wish to choose it to be. And he said, I'm very religious. And I said, that's fine. So is that your source of energy? And he went, yes. Now, it's different for everybody. So I had a person also in a workshop. She said, I tend to be very like you. I get mentally congested. So she said, mine is physical. And she said, the more I run, the more energy I have. And so she was very lean. And I said to her, how much do you run? She said, I try and run about 20 kilometers, at least 2 or 3 times a week. And I'm like, wow. So I'm not suggesting you should all do that, by the way, but, knock yourself out if you feel like it. I think the big thing here is knowing where your energy source is and what happens when you're under stress. What happens when you slip out of that harmony where there's a discordance? And what do you need to do to bring your energy back into harmony again? That's the secret. Once you know that, and that means you've got to sit down and think about that yourself. Ask yourself the questions, what do I need to do? Because trust me, high performance is driven by energy. People who manage their energy really well will always be really high performers. People who can't and who won't and who let that no control circle control their life, they're the ones that will struggle. They may have innate talent, they may be really good performers, but they will probably struggle to become high performers. The secret is you've got to work at it. The secret is you've got to challenge yourself. The secret is that you've probably at times got to go, I'm not as smart or as clever or as good as I thought I was, And it's around going, well, I'm just a human, But then again, this is what I'm going to do to change this. It's about ownership of it. So every thought creates a positive or a negative energy. And we're going to come to why that's really critical in high performance. Every thought creates a positive or a negative energy. Think about this, because when you look at your life, you're going to go, yeah, that's true. And we all have met people who are glasses half full. They won lotto, they'd be complaining, I've just won $20 million in lotto and people now want me to give them some money. It's terrible. I'm just being annoyed by people who keep asking me for money. You just won $20 million, be happy. It's like, and so we all have met people like that. The secret is to know that that's not what we choose to be. Now, if you choose to be that, of course, that's fine. But if you want to build energy, focus on the positive energy, and we'll come to this in a moment. Energy of the mind is the essence of life, says Aristotle, and that's true. So practices to build your energy, there are some really good practices. Physical exercise, do crazy fun things that you just go, great, that's really cool. People, I've talked about this, haven't I? I've just talked about this now. Don't be with the toxic people. Move them out of your life, or the negative people, or the people who want to keep pulling you down to their level. Rest and sleep. Sleep is a big one. Rest and sleep. Managing your energy, managing your sleep is a great and powerful way for page 55, which is around wellness. Balanced nutrition speaks for itself. Mindfulness. This is a big one, and it's not one that I'm probably great at. Mindfulness is about being in the present. Now, I know my weakness is I can be in the present, but I tend to jump ahead. So I've constantly got to keep pulling myself back and using time boxing and that Pomodoro technique to actually make sure I'm focusing on what I need to do now. I do some meditation, which helps me bring me into the now, but I know that my tendency is to look forward. So be mindful, focus on what is in front of you. Manage your stresses, which we've talked about. Reaffirm purpose and passion. Reaffirm our purpose and passion, which is that legacy, which is our goal, which is our north, whatever you want to call it, why you are living your life and what do you want from your life. And remember, it's a choice. It's all a choice. You either choose what you want or you choose not to. But either which way, it's a choice. So I always think it's better to make a choice that is positive, that enhances where you want to go. not enhancing where you stop. And it goes back to that decision-making problem that I see around us at the moment. That's a choice that we don't want to make a decision when people keep thinking about what they're going to do. We launched an online Academy Plus on the 17th of January. And one of the coaches who was new to us, had come out of a big corporate, she said to me, when will you start the testing on it? I said, we're not. We're launching it on Monday, and we're working on a theory of launch and learn. Sure, behind the scenes, we did some changes. We had things we needed to fix, but we were up and running. And she said to us, well, she said to me later that night as we're having a drink, she said, well, that's really different because we would have spent probably 6 months testing this and fine-tuning it and having conversations about it. And she said, you've got it up and running. I said, yeah. And it's working. It's transformed our business. So now let's look at one of the areas that I think is one of the most powerful areas that we need to focus on to create high performance, and certainly to create mastery of high performance. And it's around building resilience. Resilience is how I react to what happens to me. Focus on where the opportunity lies. After COVID, I was talking to a client, and we were talking about what we'd done with our business over COVID. And he said, wow. He said, you must be amazingly resilient. He said, what makes you resilient? And I went, oh, I never thought about it in that sense. And I said, well, ever since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I've always tried to focus on where the opportunity is, no matter what situation I'm in. And trust me, when you run a business like ours for 31 years, you know, you've encountered everything. You've looked over the cliff and a whole lot. And every single time I come back and say, where does the opportunity sit? What it does is shift the focus from that negative to the positive. And it still amazes me when I focus on opportunity versus on non-opportunity or negativity, the transformational thinking that you start creating. And again, it's a practice. You don't wake up one morning and think, I'm going to focus on opportunity. You've got to do that 30-day challenge and then continuously keep doing it to make it part of your practice. It all comes back to resilience. And there's this great story about Dr. Norman Gimesme, who is really the father of resilience. And the story is, and you've got it there on page 65, so I'll just summarize it for you. But he was doing research in a very, very low decile school in Harlem in New York. And there was one little boy who used to come every day with a very battered old lunchbox, and he used to sit with all the kids, and he used to have 2 slices of bread, nothing on the bread, just raw bread. And he used to sit with all the kids and eat his 2 slices of bread. And Gimesme was fascinated, so he got the kid in and said to the kid, so you bring 2 slices of bread? And the kid said, yeah. And the background to this kid was that his mum was a drug addict, an alcoholic, and a few other things. She really didn't look after this kid. He was about 8. He didn't know who his father was. His father had disappeared. He used to do part-time jobs to get money by picking up cans and stuff like that. The first thing he used to do every week was to buy a loaf of sliced bread for his lunch. And when Gimesme said to him, so why do you bring just 2 slices of bread with nothing on it for lunch? And he says, well, it's my bread sandwich. And then he said to Gimesme, because I'm the same as everybody else. I sit there and eat my bread sandwich. And that's when Gimesme realized what resilience was. It was around about choice. Resilience is about choice. So it's moving from the victim mentality to a choice mentality of where you go, I control, going back to what we talked about, no control and control. I control what happens to me. And I always love that story of the little boy, because it would have been so easy for that little boy to go, well, hang on, you know, my life sucks really because all of these negative things have happened in it. But he chose to have his bread sandwiches with all the other kids because he was the same as everybody else. No, he wasn't any different. He didn't see himself as any different. So resilience is really, really important. Now, how do you build resilience? Now, I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how you build resilience. So firstly, when you look at the benefits of resilience, I think it helps build adaptability. I think it helps build courage. It helps build creativity. And you've got the 6 things there that it does. It's a learned habit, a learned habit. When I think of resilience, I think of Winnie the Pooh, right? Now, for those of you who love Pooh, there was Tigger. And there was a great cartoon of Tigger with resilience. And Tigger says, it's not how high I can jump, it's how long I can keep jumping. So resilience is about that. It's not how high you can bounce, it's how long you can keep bouncing. So some of the resilience tips are, and then I'm going to give you, to wrap up, one of the best of all that will help transform your high performance practice, your life practice, your career practice. So take 1 step at a time. Some of the tips are take 1 step at a time. Practice a positive attitude and positive self-talk. Very important. Know what you can influence and how you respond in stressful situations. Connect with others. Get moving. And that's that energy piece. Focus on your energy, how you keep your energy in harmony. Do something that makes you happy. Gosh, I see this so often. Do something that makes you happy. I'm a big fan of The Boss, Bruce Springsteen. There's probably not a morning goes by that I am not listening to The Boss in some form or another. He makes me happy. And I start my day off and I'm charged. Eat healthy, get foods, get in touch with your spiritual side. And, you know, I'm not suggesting that you should become spiritual, but let's look at it from the point of view of why are you here on the planet? What do you want to be remembered for? And what is going to be your little contribution? And I think that's the important thing. Next one's laugh. Laugh changes how we think about the world around us. It changes how we learn, for example. People who are happy learning learn more. And that's one of the reasons you tell stories, because people can relate to them and they go, wow, that's amusing or not amusing. And if you're struggling, seek help. So on page 68, we've got what are some of the actions that you need to focus on? Fill them out. And then we got breath work. Now, breath work's a whole other piece of work that we could spend quite a lot of time on today. But very simply, practice in stressful situations. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, release for 4. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, release for 4. That's what SEALs use. It's a very good calming tool. So what is the tool I'm going to give you that will transform your whole resiliency practice, your whole life practice? It's for those of you who have a gratitude practice, you'll go, yep, I agree. Those of you who haven't, I suggest think about building a gratitude practice. So that's what we've got there on page 69, on page 70, and on page 71. Very simply, this is what you do if you haven't done it and you would like to try it. Take some time before you go to sleep at night in a quiet space. And you can do 2 things. 1, have a journal where you write down the things that day you are thankful for, the things you're grateful for. Or if you don't want to write it in a journal, you could be like me. I find a quiet spot and I go through the things in the day out loud. I speak out loud. You can't just think it. You have to say it out loud. And that is there's a whole lot of research that shows that that works for the human brain. You say out loud the things you're very happy for that day. And it's a powerful way of training yourself to focus on the things that are positive, the things that you're grateful for. And I can promise you, as you're starting to do this, after a while, you'll start remembering things that happened during the day that you went, wow, that was just amazing. I forgot about that. So practice that, because what it will do is that it will start building your resiliency. And lastly, affirmations. Now, the secret with affirmations is in changing my thoughts, I'm changing my future. Now, you can't just go, oh, I would like to be this and say it. You have to actually think about it. You have to work at it. You actually have to believe it. So it must resonate with your values. You must believe in the affirmation. You must take actions to make it manifest. and you must live that affirmation in every way you can. For those of you who have done a bit of research into quantum theory, which I've done a reasonable amount in, the human brain cannot delineate between reality and things you truly believe in. Powerful, isn't it? Not what you think, but you truly believe in. And so that's the power of affirmations. Affirmations are feeding into your brain. This is what I truly believe. And for your brain, after a period of time, it becomes your reality. So page 73, as we wrap up, those are your commitments. Fill out then what you want to do to build your life practice. Write out what you want your life, your north to be, your legacy, your goal. What do you want to change in your life? And actions to take a meaningful life practice. And a great quote there from Jean-Paul Sartre: commitment is an act. Commitment is an act. It's not just a word. So thank you everybody for being with me over these last few modules. Really lovely being able to be with you. I hope that through these modules you've got something of value that you can take away that will help transform your lives, that will make your lives better and more successful and enable you to master high performance for yourself. Thank you.